To make my RB67 series more complete, I thought it would be a good idea if I showed you some of the accessories that I feel are necessary to shooting with this camera. And there are quite a lot of them, as you can see by that diagram, but aside from many other lenses that you might think you need, plenty of these different types of back film holders, sheet film holders, you probably don't need. There's different kind of cases that they have installed that you don't really need. There's lots of different types of Prism Finders that you don't need. This will have to be two parts, and in the second part I'm also going to be including taking apart this camera and showing you all of the different components if you're going to be buying it piecemeal like I did. Once again, if you haven't ever seen a video about this camera, this is so that you can shoot film which is this big per frame, whereas 35mm is only that big per frame. So what do you need in order to do that with this camera? First, I'll just answer your question instead of explaining everything. I'll just list it all. Over here is what is necessary to be able to take a photo. If you don't have these things, it won't function right. Over here is everything which I think you need in order to make better photos. There's certain artistic challenges that you're going to have, and these are going to solve some problems for you. So what you'll need is a rubber lens hood, which is a bit adjustable for some different focal lengths. You'll also need an extension tube. This is the number 2, it's 82mm long. There's also a number 1 that's about half this length. I think it's more worth it to first get this one that's the length of the bellows fully extended. You're going to need a Prism Finder, one that it doesn't need to have the exposure meter on it because it's pretty much pointless, and I'll explain why. Just save your money. What's not in the system, but you need anyway, is a pneumatic release tube, and there's several filters, which these are just the necessary ones. And you'll also need a pocket digital camera. Okay, first I'll start with this rubber lens hood. This hood is good for 90 to 250mm lenses. When it's extended like this, it's for 127mm and up. You only compress it for the 90mm, but then 127 and up, you want to have it extended. And it's a screw-in type, so it just fits right on there. It fits on my 180 perfectly, because the 90 through 250mm lenses all have 77mm threads. The 55 and 65mm lenses have their own plastic hood, and the 360 and 500mm each have their own plastic hoods. I definitely recommend this over any other type of thing, a giant piece of rubber, because this gets put directly in the threads, and when you inevitably drop your lens, and it normally falls on the front for some reason, it's better to have this giant piece of rubber there because it will take all the force of the impact and distribute it around the entire ring, instead of it landing on a piece of flat concrete and denting just a little corner, ruining your screw thread so that you can't put any more filters in there without going to some trouble. The next thing I think you need is this Prism Finder, which is probably weighs more than a pound. It's an enormous block of glass that's shaped like a prism on the inside. And I first realized that I needed this when I tried to take a photo of something in a car. And you pick up the camera and you try to look through the top of it. You try to look through the top of the thing, and you can't actually look through the top of it, right? You've got to like tilt it sideways, and then your entire image is upside down and reversed, and it's really confusing to be able to see anything out of it. It's really hard to use. So in a car, it's much easier to simply use the Prism Finder, and I'll show you how to attach that. You simply push in this button at the front and slide that across and lift up this expandable lens hood. And then you put the prism down on top of it, slide it across. So now your camera is quite a bit heavier. The other reason you want this is because when you look through the lens With it covered like this, you get much better contrast. You can actually see shadows, and I'll show you. Right now, oh, look at that. You can't see anything through the lens, can you? Because of all the reflections from everything else. So even when I have the normal foldable waist level finder on, yeah, you probably still, you just see like reflections. And this is exactly the same problem you have when you're going outside. You can barely see any image over here because it's being completely washed out by sunlight or by overhead lamps or by whatever. So all that kind of gets in the way of you being able to focus on anything. You've got to like cup your hands around it and put your face directly over that thing. And that becomes a real trouble if you're trying to put this up on top of a tripod. You've got to have like a ladder that's much taller than the camera on the tripod to be able to put your head over this to see through the thing to know if you're focusing on anything correctly. That's just a huge pain. It's way easier to have the light just go straight out the back of the camera like this. Okay, next up is this pneumatic release. I always need it to at least go from the camera on the top of the tripod down to the ground, coil around a bit before it goes back up into my hand. I can't believe that anybody is able to get decent images handheld or on a tripod, pressing the shutter on the camera, or even using one of those mechanical releases, because that links you to the camera whenever you press it. Even having a good distance between this plugged into the camera and when I squeeze this bulb over here, I've still gotten double images on my film because of the movement that I was doing linking through this plastic tube. So I can't believe anyone can do it without this. I just wanted to put in this quick word about filters to end the first part. This one is just a piece of glass. They call it a UV filter. This one's a circular polarizer. This one's graded neutral density filter. This is an 80A filter, and this is a fluorescent to daylight filter. More specifically, this UV filter just needs to be a piece of glass that should transmit almost all light. Film, or at least the films that I use, are not sensitive to any wavelength shorter than 400 nanometers. So it doesn't matter whether you're blocking the ultraviolet or not, you can't record it. And normally if you don't spend upwards of $100 on a UV blocking lens, it won't completely block it anyway. So just get a piece of glass for the sole purpose of having this get dirty instead of the front of your multi-coated lens and all the threads around it getting dirty. And you don't really want to clean that over and over again. Wears away the coatings over time. This is a circular polarizer. As shown in that video clip, what they do is simply eliminate reflections from the sky on windows and on cars, and allows you to be able to see right through shop windows and things. This is another filter for the outdoors. This is a graded neutral density filter that is one stop darker at the bottom, and it allows all light through. I don't recommend buying a one stop. I recommend getting a 3, because the only time of day that you need one of these is for the darker portion to cover the sky during a sunrise or a sunset, so that's a bit more underexposed, and yet your foreground is still going to be exposed more. However, one stop is useless for that. The moment that the sun is going beyond the horizon, you need 3 stops. This is the last filter that I recommend that you spend any money on, because for some reason 3-stop filters, either 77mm or the 40.5 for the internal threads, they always cost upwards of $100. Don't worry so much about this. In fact, you can do everything that this does by simply exposure bracketing and making it a high dynamic range image in post-processing. The only actual benefit to having this is if, say, a trolley or a car or something is moving in front of you and is going so quickly that in order to get it in the shot in front of your sunset background, you have to have this in order to get the entire shot at once. That's the only reason to buy one. If you don't have that challenge, probably don't get one. Instead, what would benefit you more is to get a warming filter, which isn't pictured here, but it allows you to shoot later than sunset. Finally, we have the 2 indoor filters. This one is because all fluorescent lights appear green. They may not look green to you, but to film, they're green. You put this on, solves that problem. And for some reason, it's just a difficult problem to solve in post. If you try to eliminate it in post, it ends up deleting a bunch of data and your image doesn't look as good. If you use this, any light that would be prevented from getting to your camera is compensated for by you exposing longer. If you eliminate that green light in post, you're just deleting data and introducing noise. This is an 80A filter. It is used for correcting 3200K tungsten lamps. So the average tungsten light bulb produces a sort of yellow-orange that by having this in front of your lens will make it look like white. This will correct Christmas tree lights and most other light bulbs. However, halogens are so close to white that any bulb like that will end up becoming blue. But it'll fill most of your applications. So now you can shoot fluorescent light and in tungsten light and outdoors without getting your lens dirty, and you can have everything be more saturated and not have reflections on windows, and you can shoot in sunsets with one photo. In the second part, I will explain the pieces that you need to assemble this camera, and I'll explain some of the advantages of having an instant film back.